Light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome, I am Sister Who. I appreciate all the compliments I get from viewers through email and by other means, saying how I managed to be positive in this time that we're living that seems so negative in so many ways, and violent, tragic things happening, and wars, and corporate victimization of people, and homelessness, and so many reasons to give up hope and to be cynical and pessimistic. And yet I appreciate the compliments, and yet I kind of chuckle, because when I look in the mirror I try to figure out, so when was I being positive? Because I've had a few individuals tell me that sometimes they think I'm too negative because I don't hesitate to talk about challenges, and I don't hesitate to talk about it when things go wrong. And yet I think the only way we can deal with all the challenges is by having some place to, as one might say, park your hope, something to hang, a hook to hang your hope on. There needs to be some way to have hope, some way to keep going forward, something that will bring meaning and purpose to all the struggle that goes on. And perhaps I'm more constantly aware of that by being autistic, because every moment is a struggle between so many conflicting thoughts and so much information coming in through all my senses and from my thought and from my brain as well as my senses. And to try to process all of that and try to keep up, and the struggle that is every moment of my life. And I'm not saying this as a poor little me kind of thing, but rather saying that with all of this going on, because there's so much struggle, and the struggle is so constant and has been there my entire life, it is so very, very important that there be a meaning and a purpose and a reason for this, because it is the meaning and the purpose that I'm able to assign that often is not inherent within the activity itself, but the way that I interpret and understand the situation and what it might lead to, that gives me the drive and the energy to keep going and to keep trying and to keep trusting that somehow it really will make sense. And I really will be glad that I went through this and that I didn't give up. And it's like all the, well, and a number of years ago I started getting into the habit of, when I watch movies, and a number of them I've watched many, many times, and as I'm getting through the middle part where everything's falling apart, because the basic format of most movies is you start out with this sort of introductory phase, and then it proceeds into all these problems and finally builds to this climax where there's a breakthrough of some sort, and the good guys win, so to speak. And then there's a little bit of what happens after that as people go off to their own lives again, or what what came after. The start of the next adventure or something that, tune in next time to see what happens. And as I was watching the movie, a particular movie a few years ago, I believe it was a recording of a movie called The Boy Who Could Fly. And it gets right up to the end there, and everything is wrong. And there's so much loss and so much adversity and so much struggle. And it becomes this challenge of how do you readjust, is it just readjust expectations? Is it some trite advice from pop psychology? If you just be thankful, then good things will come your way. Well, I've been thankful, and it doesn't always work that way. And if you just smile and have a good attitude, then everything will, well, I tried that too. It doesn't always work. And so I keep coming back to this question of, well, what does always work? And the answer is nothing. There is nothing that always works. We are constantly going from one circumstance to another, to another, to another. We deal with administrators who abuse their positions. We deal with teachers who don't want to do their jobs. We deal with all sorts of, neighbors who don't care about anyone but themselves, apartment managers who have no qualms about lying in any way whatsoever, just in order to present a positive image, as if image was everything and substance was nothing. Of course, anyone who's been watching Sister Who for any length of time knows that I would believe that substance is everything. Image counts maybe a little bit, but you can always introduce yourself and further introduce yourself, though I have to concede, as one person said, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. But there are always ways to recover from even leaving a bad first impression. For me, what matters is the substance, because that's what's going to be there day in and day out, year after year after year, and it's cumulative. So when pop psychology comes along and says, just be thankful, just be happy, just be whatever, and I say, no, I don't want to lie about what I'm experiencing. I don't want to lie about what I'm seeing. But it would be just as much of a lie to say that any particular adversarial moment I experience is the last one. Unless I am actually going to be killed, it is not the last moment. And until I actually am killed, I won't really actually know whether I will be killed. Because there are lots of people who have been in car accidents and woke up in a hospital afterwards and, to the realization, oh, it's not over. I'm still here. And time again, as I've been through adversity in my life, it looks like the thing that will destroy me, and it's terrifying, and I make all the sounds of someone who's terrified. And then somehow ingenuity or divine intervention or something, I make it through, and I look in the mirror and the dust has settled, and I kind of stop and pause for a moment and realize that, hey, I'm still here. It didn't kill me. I thought it would, but it didn't. And because I'm still here, that means there's still something I can do. Something, even if I have nothing but the clothes on my back, I can start walking down the road to the next town or the next town or the town after that. Because in each of those towns, there are people with diverse experiences and diverse needs, and one of them may actually need the help that only I can give. There may be somebody watching this show who needs to hear exactly what I'm saying, and I don't know if I'll ever meet them in person or not. The last few weeks, I've actually been getting quite a few emails from viewers who have been watching the show over the internet in Indonesia. I've never been to Indonesia, don't know if I will ever get there or not. It sounds fascinating in various ways, but they're evidently getting something from my shows that is helpful to them because they keep watching and they keep writing. And I'm in as a quote from the movie Bicentennial Man, in the words of the great Andrew Martin, one is glad to be of service. And I'm happy if anything I can say or do through these ongoing television shows is helpful and empowering to people, because the basic reason that Sisterhood exists is to nurture the personal and spiritual growth in others. And there's even one gentleman a young man in Poland, who emailed me that he was using my television show as a way to learn English. So I hope I'm not talking too fast for his translation software to help him understand what I'm saying. But there has been a lot of adversity in my life, but the adversity is not what defines me. The adversity is that to which I must respond, and it is the honest description of my experience. And I'm not going to lie about it. But I'm also not going to stop there, because a moment is a very brief thing. As quickly as a moment can happen, it's gone. And we move on to the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. And to be small enough to stay within one moment is to be very small indeed. So, but by its very nature, life is expansive. I mean, whether you're talking about the basic mitosis of a cell, one cell becoming two cells becoming four cells, things that are alive grow. They expand, they become bigger in every conceivable way. And why should the human spirit be any less? And with that in mind, my human spirit is bigger than any of the moments I have lived, no matter how tragic or euphoric or whatever kind of moment they've been. They're only one out of billions of moments I've lived. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. The challenge in all of that, people want to be helpful. They want to fix problems. There's very few things that you can find inherent in humanity everywhere you go, but I think being problem solvers is one of them. That from the first time a caveman ever went hunting and was hungry and needed to find some way to get something to eat, all the way down to the present, no matter where you are, in what situation, whatever it is, unless there is some negative experience pushing one in the opposite direction, people respond to any challenge as looking for a way to resolve it. In some cases, they resolve it by avoiding it, by going around it. Well, that still shows intelligence and learning. That's still being a problem solver. If you see a pothole in the street and you swerve around it, if you see something falling and you move to catch it, those are all evidences of being problem solvers. And humanity, individually, collectively, are problem solvers. And because of that, whenever we meet people who have problems, which I guess includes all of us really, people's natural inclination is to want to fix the problem for the other person. And sometimes that can get really irritating, because many of us don't want to be fixed. We don't see ourselves as broken. We see ourselves as human beings moving through a diversity of life experiences, some good, some bad. We want to laugh when it's funny, we want to cry when it's sad. And whatever interferes with the honest experience of our own lives becomes, adversarial. And so even the person who wants to help comes in and wants to fix things, and we may not want them to fix things, but we may want them to simply be with us as we work through it, to go with me to the funeral, to help me rototill the garden, whatever it might be. Help me figure out how to satisfy the demands of this college that I want to, where I want to become a student. Help me find a way to get hired by this particular company. Help me find a good place to retire after I have finished my working years, so that I will have my needs met for the rest of my life, rather than running out of money and having to go back to work. These are all challenges, but in some cases people actually ask you to step in and solve the problem for them. If you have the expertise to do so, that's one thing. If I'm asking a plumber to fix a leaking pipe, that's one thing. if I'm asking a plumber to fix my life and make everything better, the plumber doesn't have that ability. And in many cases, people come to someone in a problem and say, oh, I can fix that, I know how to fix that. But if they don't have all the information, they may be applying the wrong solution. It kind of reminds me of the joke about the elderly woman at the intersection. And the joke is, why did it take 10 Cub Scouts to help her across the street? Well, because the woman didn't want to go. That, they were dragging her across a street in a direction that she didn't want to go. It's amusing, but it also has a grain of truth in it, because in talking with a friend of mine who's been blind since birth, she says that sometimes she will come to an intersection and she will stand there for 2 or 3 light changes, not because she wants someone to drag her across the street, but so that she can form a picture of the intersection in her mind based exclusively on the sounds of the sounds and the rhythm of the traffic. How often does it go totally quiet? How long is it quiet? When it is quiet, that tells her how much time she has to get across the street to wherever the next curb is. And so that's where, from my friend Jean, I learned that when you encounter a person with a disability, you first ask whether they want help, and then you ask how they want help, because it may not be what you think. In terms of dealing with my own challenges, there are times when I just want people to listen, and I don't want them to try to fix things. I want them to remind me that somebody cares, that I'm not alone. And there are other times when people have the resources to help, and I want them to help, and sometimes I've even asked them to help, but they don't want to do anything more than send good wishes and run out the door. And if that's the choice they want to make, I'll respect that, but I will expect that they understand from that point on that that's not what a friend does. That a friend doesn't drive by in their car, see you stranded along the side of the road with a flat tire, and just say, well, I hope you get that fixed, and keep driving. That's not what a friend does. And that if you're family to someone, it means that you're the first one there when there's trouble. It's not just biological relations. It's families working together to make things happen, to make shelter and to make food, clothing, and shelter happen. The family is the closest thing we have to the tribal societies of the past, in which the whole tribe was a family. And it was not the children of any particular parent, but it was the children of the tribe. And it was the elderly of the tribe. And everybody in the tribe could benefit from the wisdom that the elderly had accumulated, and everyone in the tribe could benefit from the enthusiasm and the energy and the strength and the ability that the young people had to do all these things that perhaps elderly people were tired or not, or maybe weak or frail, and were not able to do anymore. The challenge to that basic motif of tribal societies, though, is that the majority of them existed within pre-industrial times. In more modern times, the definition of what it means to be elderly is being completely redefined. What has not been adequately redefined yet is our sense of being family and being a tribe for each other, of being the collective human family. That we can have our technological inventions and our industrial products and our economic systems and the ability to travel all the way around the world if we want. And in that, to be sure that we don't lose each other, that we don't find ourselves the sole occupant of a sort of Star Trek holodeck program, that when the program gets turned off, there's nobody left, we're all alone. The more I see of life and the more I see what works in life, the more convinced I become that the fundamental reality is symbiotic relationships. That in the same way that plants exhale oxygen and people exhale carbon dioxide, and each needs the other in order to survive. That same sort of mutually beneficial dynamic exists all across the board, between the rich and the poor, between all races, between all forms of life. I guess it's an idea that I first heard expressed in the world of the theater. When I first got in, well, I went to an acting school in New York City, but there was a summer acting class before that. It was the idea that there are no small parts, only small players. For any play to work, every single prop and small one-line comment or everything had to be absolutely perfect, because the person who had the most lines, the quote-unquote star of the show, could not do the show at all without every single prop and supporting line in place. It's not that anyone is any more or less important. They're basically all equal, and in order for the show to happen, they all have to be there and they all have to be making their contribution. If somebody drops the ball or something doesn't happen or a prop breaks or any number of things, the other thing I learned in the world of theater is this notion that the show must go on, that there needs to be a perseverance and a dedication, that by being fully present and by not accepting any setback as the final event of the play, that, for example, there was another time in high school when I was in a performance of The Crucible, and there was one point in one of the courtroom scenes where somebody forgot their line and nobody quite knew what to do, and everybody on stage looked at each other and didn't know what else to do, so the three young ladies jumped up and screamed and ran around the stage, and after about 30 seconds, because that's an action that happens a number of times in that courtroom scene within the play The Crucible, they stopped and somebody remembered a line and the play went on. What we didn't realize is that we had inadvertently skipped about 5 pages of the script, and one of the characters never went on that night because her scene was totally skipped. But the whole point was that the show had to go on. We didn't accept this is where it ends. We didn't accept this is where it stops. We took whatever was available and we found a way to keep going. And there have been so many times of late where I get frustrated with people because it's like learned helplessness has become a new epidemic in humanity, and it needs to be curtailed and addressed and opposed, because something goes wrong and suddenly, well, I guess we can't do it after all. And I'm usually the one to stand up and say, no, it just means we find a different way. But we are not going to settle for not doing it. We are going to find a way to get this done. But that's the kind of determination and endurance that was required to essentially to build every advancement humanity has ever known. Every city, every pioneering effort, every tribal migration. It requires people who will not give up, who will not take no for an answer. And if they cannot get a yes in this venue, they'll go to this one. But they will not stop and let the no be the final piece. In dealing with adversity, then, it's not so much that you have to follow anybody's advice as that you have to find your own way. A peculiar thing to me that I've run into a number of times lately is where people who are not autistic want to tell me how to be autistic. And on one hand, I appreciate their good intentions, but having a neurotypical try to plan how an autistic should live makes no sense. I mean, I understand that it's a neurotypical telling an autistic person how to live within a neurotypical world, but what they don't always realize is that the methods they're describing can only be done by neurotypicals. It would make about as much sense as me trying to lecture a blind person on how to live within a seeing world using methods that are really only accessible to seeing people. Without the Braille alphabet, without traffic lights that make bird chirps, without white canes that tap out a sort of sonar. I mean, I saw one man who was blind once who was walking down the street in a parade, and he could literally tell where the parked cars were by the tapping sound that his cane made. I'm phenomenally attuned hearing to be able to tell that. I mean, I think I would have been crashing into everything if I tried the same thing. But the point being, you know, when all is said and done, it's I saw a poster once when I was in college, I think, college or high school, that said the race is not necessarily to the swift, but to the one who keeps on going. No matter how much adversity there is, no matter how much it is the backdrop of your entire life, you still have the ability to be the one candle, to be the one flashlight, to be the one person who takes a step in a different direction, to be the one person who says, you can try to build whatever cage you want. As long as I have an independent thinking mind, I'm doing what I believe. And I reserve the right, you know, now and always, to say no. That if this is something that is that contrary to principle and that contrary to what meets my needs, I have the right to say no. And, you know, in terms of people with disabilities, the blind person knows what the blind person needs, and the autistic person knows what the autistic person needs, and the deaf person knows what the deaf person needs. And it is not for someone else to tell them what their life experience is, because you haven't seen the world through my eyes or thought through my brain or lived within my body for a single day. So don't presume that I'm lying when I tell you what I need. In any case, dialogue is so important, and it needs to be an ongoing thing for all of us, because we each know what we need, but other people need to know what we need too, or else we cannot be each other's collaborators. So sometimes it's helping because we know what to do, sometimes it's listening because we don't, but at all times it's being together in love. Thank you very much for watching.